That's great to hear. So, welcome to this wonderful caching and performance deep dive today. I'm very happy to present it today to you. And we'll start with a very quick overview of what to expect in this session. But first, quickly about me. I'm Fabien France. I've been using Drupal for over 10 years now. I'm currently the Vice President of Software Engineering at Tech1 Consulting. I'm the co-author of BigPipe and the Drupal 8.9 caching system. In between, I'm also a Drupal 7 maintainer in several subsystems like the theme system, Twig, etc. My motivation is to teach you all I know about caching today. This really is what I want to bring to you. This is what I want to get you. This really is what I want to give you. And quick disclaimer, however, it would be an absolute beginner session. There are microphone problems. Okay. Can someone hear me? Okay, cool. So continue. It's an absolute beginner session. However, we'll be looking at some concepts from a different angle today. And it will be roughly 3 parts with 10 minutes each and then 5 minutes for questions in between parts. Please use something like Q column to mark your question. And June will be collecting those for me. And then I'll be looking them through and answering them in between so we don't have all the questions at the end. Part 1 is about general caching, cache invalidation strategies, cache items, cache max age, and tags. Part 2 is about cache variation, cache hit ratio, placeholders, and the uncachable things. And part 3 is about caching layers and common caching pitfalls. So what is caching? What is caching about? As I said, beginner session. In computing, a cache is a hardware or software component that stores data so that future refresh for a data game can serve faster. Okay. I think that's way too much theory. I love pizza. For example, we have a restaurant and we prepare meals, our pages. Normally, a pizza takes 10 minutes to prepare, but those persons who have figured out a real nice thing, and that's called the takeaway. The pizza is wrapped and given out. That is caching. So definitely, this is giving you the idea. Basically, caching is we have something that is pre-made. We can just give it out directly. We don't have to do anything. We can directly profit from it. So you can say all those takeaway pizza shop, they've figured out caching. The performance of pizza delivery is definitely improved a lot. However, our example is a little bit, well, yeah, we only have a finite numbers of pizzas. So for our example to still work, we'll be saying we have a magic replicator. The customer comes, we are taking the pizza, we replicate it, and we give it away. And that's it. So every item that we cache gets a name. That's a cache item name or cache address. In our example, for example, the pizza marinara or pizza margherita. In Drupal, this is a cache ID, or later this is also called cache keys. So, for example, a cache key sample, pizza margherita, is transformed in pizza colon margherita. It's the same essentially. So definitely, that's what you have. So let's make pizza. And this is how you make pizza. We're checking the pizza cache and see if we can get a pizza margherita from it. And if we have a pizza, we return the pizza. And if not, we ask for our pizza oven service to make us a nice and sweet, or maybe not sweet, more salty pizza margherita. And so this, and afterwards we set the margherita. So this basically is a basic caching example. The caching example you need to understand. You get something. If you have something, you return it, and if not, you recreate it. So this is very nice and helpful for understanding that. But who sees the bug? There's a bug on that slide. Correct. Either the get cache ID or the set cache ID are wrong. What's important is that we have the other person is also right. Usually we should be selecting the data property. We are not doing that here. Good catch. But what I want to get out here is that we do the cache ID. And with the cache ID, if we get and set with a variable, it's much simpler to not make that mistake. And while it might sound like a very trivial example, I've seen that in the wild. It happened to me myself, and it leads to hard to debug bugs. So really use this pattern, not the other one. So how long is the product valid? In the supermarket, we have a best before date. I tried to find a pizza that doesn't look good anymore. I couldn't find one, and what I could find, I didn't want to give you. So anyway, after a while, you really don't want to eat a pizza anymore. You really don't want to drink the orange juice anymore. The solution for all of that is the expiration date. So everything that you can buy in supermarkets usually has an expiration date. So, and that's very simple to do. We have cache ID, we put the time to live, and instead of our set command before, we are now adding the time to live to it. And that was how the Drupal page cache in Drupal 3.2.6 was working. And it's still a perfect pattern. And it's a very easy pattern. We've used to run a huge production site just on this pattern of caching everything in Akamai for 10 minutes unconditionally. If your editors can do that for you and say, it's okay, we can wait 10 minutes. It's a great pattern. It can help a lot. So still a very great pattern for high traffic sites. And we can do all these nice things I'll be showing, but it works. So at the weekend, we want to clean up. So we can also delete the pizza now and take it home and eat it ourselves. So this is how you delete things from the cache. Just cache ID, you delete. So we're growing, customers are so happy, and they're coming to our shop and they want to take this home. So we have a frozen pizza margherita. It's a duff with 0.0 flour, pint of salt and water, custom-made tomato sauce, mozzarella and basil. And yeah, we use a pizza maker now. We make a frozen pizza, and we can now store it for 30 days. That's great. So how does our shop work now? The customer drives to our pizza shop, orders the frozen pizza margherita, the waiter gets the pizza from fridge at the counter, and now he checks the expiration date. And if it's expired, he gets one from the central storage in the cellar. And regardless, he has a pizza now, he replicates it and delivers the pizza to the customer. So basically, checking for expiration is an active process. Our waiter that is serving the customer is doing that for us. Now we want to offer marinara as well. The same duff, custom-made tomato sauce, extra virgin olive oil, oregano, and garlic. It's a vegan pizza, yeah. So it's good for all my friends in the theming community. It's a completely new pizza. It's not a variation. It's now on offer. So we have this pizza margherita, marinara. We make it in the same way, basically. You change the cache ID, make frozen. We are growing more, so we have a better recipe for the duck after our super secret expedition to Italy, Pizza Duff 2.0. So we now need to invalidate all the cached old pizzas. We don't want to wait for 30 days. Unfortunately, the old and new pizzas are now kind of mixed, so that's not so good. How do we now say new or old? The naive solution is we just add it to the name, and we get longer and longer and longer lines that way. Does not scale, and we have all the old versions that kept around. This then looks like this, and actually some caches used to look like this, and it's just a mess. So that's not what we want to do. The solution is we tag it. We have a margarita, we have a marinara, we have our expiration date, and then we have a tag, and it's DUF version 2, DUF version 2. Yay. And again, tagging something is very simple in Drupal. We just have this fourth argument to the Drupal cache bin set, the DUF version. As it's easy to miss, I'm putting in a helper variable. So cache tag equals DUF version. So Drupal now knows we want to expire this whenever our DUF version changes. And expiring that is also very simple. We just call the invalidate text function, DUF version, and we're good to go. What's very, very important to understand about cache tags, and it took me myself a very, very, very long time to understand that at the beginning, Drupal versions the tags automatically for us. But tagging in reality is versioning. It's like a version number we are doing for our cache. And we can use all the ways of tagging. We could have version 3.1.0, or we could use a timestamp. Memcache, for example, the cache tags implementation that I created with Brandon together that uses timestamps. We could use the name, Snow Leopard, whatever. We can use a counter. That's what core uses. Core basically counts in this cache tags table the tag and how often it has been invalidated. That's how tagging works in core. And it's not easy to understand at the beginning. We have node 1, it's saved, and the cache tag is invalidated. And now we know that the cache tag of node 1, it should be version 43. And so anything tagged with node 1 must have this value of version 43, else it's invalid. So this is important because first you think like, hey, but how does this indirection work, etc. And it's so important to understand this, that you can tag whatever cache entry you want with this node 1 tag. And whenever this version changes, all of those out entries are invalid. As said, it's complex, but once mastered, so powerful because the cache item includes the name and it includes the version this cache item is on currently. And the canonical store, our cache tags table, it always stores the current version of the tag. In our case, it's version 43 now. So basically, whenever we set something in the cache, what you don't see when we specify this duck version is that we instead not only store the DUF version, but also the current version it's on. And this is essential to understand. And if you have trouble, maybe review the slides later or ask me. But once you get this part of the tagging thing, things get so much easier. And I know I've been there. I've written render cache before now in cache tags, and I've done all the things with the naming change, etc. So yeah. One thing that's important is everything in the same request always uses the same current version. So back to our pizza analogy, the waiter checks the list of DUF versions once a day and not every minute. So how our shop works now with tagging, basically exactly the same, except that the waiter now checks the expiration date and the tags, and then he marks the pizza as valid or invalid, and if it's not valid, gets one from central storage, and else he replicates and delivers the pizza to customer as usual. So everything we've learned so far, we know how to get an item from the cache, we know how to set an item in the cache, we know that we can direct delete an item by the name of it. We learned how to use time-based invalidation via the cache maxH mechanism, and we learned how to use tag-based invalidation. And we know that core is cheating because in the end, because we are caching those cache tags for the remainder of the request, cache tags don't solve the problem of cache invalidation. They just move it somewhere else. There was, we were a long time joking, hey, we've solved the problem of cache invalidation. But if you look closer, it's not really the case. So question time. I'm looking at the collecting of questions real quick. And we'll check. Can a cache block a page load from Todd Smith? I'm trying to understand that. So basically, yes, if your cache is very, very slow and it takes a very long time to retrieve things because, for example, you have like a network problem or things like that, then yes, indeed, a block can block the page load. And we can even do that deliberately. Not sure if we get to it because time is fleeting. But if not, the slides have something regarding stampede protection. How do you create your own cache table like pizzas, and what is the benefit? We learn more about the benefits of bins later. To make it prefix it a little bit on that, the main benefit is you can put different cache bins to different systems. So we'll later learn that, well, the database, the warehouse across the street is not the best way to store everything. It might be better to have the pizza dough below the counter and not having to drive 10 miles. How do you preload a cache in Drupal 7? It's a little bit tricky. There's a pretty good module by Mike, I forgot the name, but there's a module called AMQDPC, and it's basically an async MySQL prefix query cache, preload query cache, and this can preload certain things that have been frequently used on that page. How can we use cache tag for real-time data coming from third party? You can basically, you need some way of identifying when this real-time data is changing. So either the third party is giving you a heads up whenever it changes it, then you just synchronize the cache tag to yourself and say, hey, this data is now invalid, or we do it differently, and basically you have a cron job and you frequently check this third-party data, and if you see a change, then you invalidate the cache tag, and then you reprocess all the data. Has to do with views. Yeah, AMQPC could still help with that, Todd Smith. What properties or things should have cache tags? Not right now. Cache metadata object can add cacheable dependency. We can do a little bit later. And hopefully, I think it's called APDQC. Yeah, thank you very much. We continue with the session for now, just so that we go on. But there were some nice questions. So what should you cache? It's 2 years later. We've grown even more. Success is great. Shop is thriving. We are ready for new products. So we offer full new variations in our shop: a gluten-free duff, a vegan mozzarella, pizza spinacci, new pizza variation, gluten-free offering, and even a vegan margarita offering with vegan mozzarella. Quick recap: what we have. How we want it to be. The customer comes, orders the pizza. Now the waiter asks for the preferences. Hey, would you like a vegan or gluten-free pizza? This is our cache context. The waiter then checks the fridge for the wanted variation, gives the wanted variation to the customer, or produces it and then stores it in the fridge. And again, we could say, hey, all those variations, we just put it as part of the name, but we now have a little bit of a problem that we now have my nada pizza that is vegan by default, and now we also have a vegetarian marinara, which doesn't make sense because it's vegan always. So this would essentially double the space of things. And the waiter would need to find the pizza again from all this mess, like we've seen before, like very difficult. What we really want to have is this. We want to have like buckets. So you have the pizza margherita, pizza marinara, and you go to the pizza margherita shelf, and then you have like one tagged gluten-free, one gluten, and then you can go further down in this tree. And so that's cool. And cache contexts are generally used for variation in Drupal 8 and 9. They are computed on demand, and they internally add the cache context values to the cache ID name. So while the end result looks pretty similar to what we've tried to achieve before, because we let core do it, it gives more possibilities for core to optimize this. And in essence, and this is probably the first time I've talked about this in detail, how a cache context works internally is that every cache item has two things. So basically, we first have a cache item, which is basically our margherita shelf, pizza margherita, and then we have the cache context. This is region, yes, no. This is gluten-free, yes, no. So when we look at the pizza margherita, we know then what we need to ask the customer. We now know all the variations that a pizza margherita can have and has in our system. We also have some little tricks that if no one ever orders a gluten-free margherita, then this would not ever show up here, but that's a detail. And then in the end, core does this. And so it's vegan, yes, no, gluten-free, yes, no. And again, we have expires and tag. So we have a two-tier caching system, which is very, very efficient in doing this, because we know what we need to vary this on. And this is essentially how dynamic page cache even can work in all of that. The same for the marinara, but you can see it's only gluten-free. There's no vegan whatever, so it also has only this variation. Now with the intelligent variation, the waiter looks at the pizza variations for the margherita, and just then he asks the customer for his preference, vegan and or gluten-free. If the customer ordered a marinara, he would only ask, would you like gluten-free? So we have cache ID, cache context router, and then the cache context execution. The rest is as usual. Cache context, unfortunately, still only work with render arrays. It took Wim and me quite some time to understand them in depth, and hopefully render cache at one point will provide this in the future. So you can just use it as service. For now, we use a render array. Render array is basically how all Drupal rendering works, and to make it very simple, I've created here a comparison. And we're going back and forth a little bit. So while before, we basically set up our cache items before, and then we call the make function, and then we set. Within the render array, we basically set up the cache, and then we have the pre-render, and then we have the pizza. And so this is basically our cache miss function. So it's very similar if you just compare those parts here. It's just that we put it into a predefined structure. And Drupal internally then basically is doing first a cache get based on this cache information. And we tell it how to store it. And then it calls this function to prepare our pizza. Then it renders our pizza. And then in the end, we render it and we store it in the cache. So we don't have to do all this get, set, etc., which you're used to. It's all handled automatically. And yeah, this is basically how render array works. So we provide the cache metadata and then the cache miss function. And now if we add our cache context, we could add them directly here in the array at the top with the context user vegan or user gluten-free. But the problem is if we were doing it like this unconditionally, we had the problem again that we would also again vary the marinara of being vegan or non-vegan. Not what we want. So instead we do it like this. Oh yeah, we can also do it after the fact. So we put a little bit here, and this just so that you can easier see the difference here. We have the cache context, user vegan, user gluten-free. And here we can now do a condition for, is the pizza name as a margarita, then add the vegan cache context, and if it's not, we only have the gluten-free cache context. So this way we can vary it, and obviously we could be doing this also outside the pre-render function. The important thing, however, here is to know and to understand is that that usually the pizza maker itself would at some point add this cache context. So it would be added way down the tree somewhere, not necessarily here where you're setting up the cache. And that's also the nice thing about cache context. You know something varies within the tree by user or by if the user is vegan or not, you can just add the cache context there where you need it. And you don't have to worry about finding the exact entry point of where that block is started or whatever. You can just add it wherever you want. And this is what I want to show with this example. This is how you create a cache context. Pretty simple. We just extend the user cache context, check the field vegan, register as a service. This is more for you to check later. So it works great. We have a different problem now. The fridge is full. We now have so many variations, and we have a pizza spinacci, it's bought way less. And we have a custom pizza and it's uncacheable. And so one good idea to do when you're dealing with performance and caches, etc., is you check your cache hit ratio and invalidations. And Moshe Weitzman, good friend, made this project called Cache Metrics, where you can collect this cache metrics and, for example, send them to New Relic, and then you can see them all and see, hey, this cache tag is invalidated really, really often, like this custom pizza. Maybe it's not a good idea to cache it. So we disable the cache. Easiest would be to not cache it at all, but that's not always possible. So basically, the idea is somewhere, again, in your tree, you can do a build cache max h0, and again, this bubbles up to that. And then we also have cacheable objects, and you can do set cache max h0. And basically, a cacheable object is having the same properties like our render array before. Is basically, we made it simpler that if you deal with an entity and you know now, hey, this is uncacheable from this point on, you can just add this both cache context and also runtime cache context, so that it's made way simpler to add those cache metadata to our rich objects that we have in Drupal 8 and 9, and not only deal with render arrays. However, for the ease of simplicity, I'm not going more into the cacheable dependency and objects, but the concept is always the same. Basically, you can ask the object, hey, what are your properties? And then the object is saying you, hey, I have this properties, and actually what our render tree is doing if it encounters such an object is it adds it as a cacheable dependency to the render tree, and what ends up in the render tree is the same cache array, render array that we've seen before. So it's basically just an indirection step. Yeah. So full example is we have our pre-render function again. If the pizza name is custom, we make a custom pizza, set the cache max h0, and we early return. And if it's a spinacci, we just set the max h0, fall through, and the rest of the callback. One problem of that approach is we've set it's the cache max h0 after the function has been rendered. Looking again, we're doing this within pre-render. That means we tried already to get that item from the cache. And this is a huge pitfall, and it happened to me more often than I'd like to admit. But if you add a max h0 somewhere, and it's after rendering, not before, that means that if you still have an item in the cache, it will happily retrieve it, and you'll be wondering, why does my freaking max h0 not work? and you're like debugging for 15 minutes, and you're like, huh? I don't understand. And I've edited, it should be working. If you then clear your cache, suddenly it starts working. And it was just because it obviously still had an old version of it. So that's, a common pitfall. It happens so often for me during development of the Drupal 7 render cache module. It was always like, you know. So I'm giving you more ways of clearing cache tags in this 3 ways, which we cache tag invalidate rendered via Drupal console, via Drush, or via calling this functionality. And if rendered cache tag is at least added to all render arrays, so there's a huge chance you're getting the cache you want with it, and your max-h will be working afterwards. We can also set the max-h obviously before it's retrieved from the cache. I've restructured our example a little bit again. So we set the pizza name. We have this make pizza function now on our controller. And if the pizza name is custom or Spinaki, then we just put the max-h 0. And this is akin to a request-based cache policy. That means we are not even trying to retrieve something from cache, but we know from start on, well, if max-h 0 is set, we won't be ever trying to do a get. So this is more efficient, but not always possible. So Drupal provides you those. Cache chains. No pizza shop creates a pizza always from scratch. That's a given. The pizza is made from pre-prepared things. A duff, and a good duff needs 12 to 24 hours till it's even ready. Tomato sauce, ingredients. And in the same way, Drupal pages consist often of a main page response, which you usually need to custom cache, because except for dynamic page cache, it's not cached by itself, but you can add it yourself. And then we have blocks, menus, header, footer, and that's basically only decoration around the main page response. And again, we can learn so much from pizza makers, because we have 2 ways to create a pizza with mushrooms. We start with an empty pan, add the duff, add tomato sauce, add mozzarella cheese, and then in the end add the mushrooms. Or we start with a pre-made finished pizza margherita and just add the mushrooms. And this is dynamic page cache right there. It's a pizza margherita with mushrooms. If you remember that, that's basically how Drupal works now in Drupal 8 and 9. It's basically saying whenever we can cache most of the page, then just do that and just add the mushrooms on top. And again, and this was also how I came up with this whole system of how it's developed, because I was like looking at Drupal.org and was saying, there's only my tiny name that's different for all users, and most of the experience is similar. Why can't we cache that? And turns out now in Drupal 8 and 9 we can. So we cache the response basically as much as possible, and then we just add flavor and placeholders afterwards. And to make real use of dynamic page cache power is you have 2 ways to do that. You could disable the dynamic page cache all the inner parts, and this basically our blank pan we create from scratch. Or we cache the whole response in dynamic page cache, and then we just add some placeholders for very dynamic data. Blocks are right now in core the only things that are automatically having this lazy builder functionality, which allows them to be auto placeholdered. Quick saying, gluten-free cannot be a placeholder. It's the foundation of our pizza, so we need both. We need variation, and we need those placeholders which are out of band. So case-by-case decision. A placeholder can be independently rendered. It must not depend on anything that has been executed before. Basically, you're coming right out of authentication, and now the main page request would start, and we are not doing that. We are just starting directly. Analogy again, it's not possible to add more wheat to the duff after the pizza is finished already. Wouldn't really taste well. And this is classified top secrets, but I'm giving away the secret now. How do you create a placeholder manually? It's very simple. You just put it in attached. You take whatever placeholder string you want. You put the same placeholder string in your markup, and then you put build any render array. And that's it. That's a placeholder. The contract it's executed after all the other parts have been rendered. From that, we are going from pre-render to a lazy builder, which is a way stronger contract. Again, we have a back and forth slide here a little bit. You see not much changes. Basically, we have this lazy builder build. This can either be a controller with a special dot syntax or like a static function that's building it. And then we have the pizza name. And here we can't put an object. We definitely can't put an object. While here, we could put anything in this render array with pre-render. So that's the main thing. But you see pre-render, lazy builder, it's not so different at all. And we can also explicitly say we always want to create a placeholder, so we just put this create placeholder true in combination with this lazy builders. Yeah. Must not contain complex data and must not depend on main page requests. That's the important thing. And it allows us to use BigPipe. It's in core, you enable it, it's good to go. It allows us to cache the uncacheable. We just cache everything we can cache, and the rest we render via placeholder. It allows us to break a variation per page, per user, which would not be really many cache hits. We can just have per page and then a little snippet on the page, which is per user. So question time again. When you update a cache view which lists 5 nodes, are the tags related to each node regenerated? Yes. Basically, listings are still a huge problem because if something new comes in or something old goes out, you delete something, then cache tags are a little bit problematic. But if you just update the title, yes, the full view would be a thing. A real-life example of when to use a cache context. Very simple. You are having an e-commerce shop site and you want to give a different experience based on country, and you get country as an HTTP header in from Akamai or whatever CDN you use, or a Geo API, and then you can just create a system-wide cache context, and you know automatically you will never serve a non-country specific content to users. That was pretty difficult in Drupal 7 before. It's super simple in Drupal 8 now. How does cache work with media entities? I don't know. The question is not enough. What are the options for decoupled JSON API-based sites? Basically, you can include the render cache service is private, but you can set up a quick render array and basically put whatever in. There are other talks that go into more advanced detail in that, but there are definitely options of making that use. Yeah, I can find one for you later, but there was one. BigPipe is only for auth users. No, yeah, it can be used for anonymous users as well, but usually page cache itself was more efficient. May have missed it, but what are placeholders? Placeholders are basically the topping on the pizza. So let's assume you have a page and everything looks the same for the user, except for a little block where it says, "Hi, Fabian." And so basically this "Hi, Fabian," you create a placeholder. And in Drupal, if you use a block and you vary this by user, then already Drupal will create the placeholder for you. And so I have this "Hey Fabian" block, and I have the page response, which has whatever content, but it's the same for every user. And so Drupal will cache this content completely without your placeholder. And then it will execute the "Hi Fabian" placeholder. And so it will say, "Hi, Justin," for yourself. Pineapple and pizza, no comment. Link to the slides will be coming after the presentation. Slides are on Google Slides, so I can just share them after the presentation. Pizza delivery or not, made updates, no idea, but let's continue. So where should you shop? The shop is even more successful, but the customers need to drive to us. Many drive for 2 hours or more, and that's really not nice. Yeah, it would be better if it was nearer to them. So can we do something about it? Yes, we can. We offer our frozen pizzas in supermarkets around the world. Our solution is a content delivery network. And Drupal 8.9 makes it really easy. You choose a CDN, Akamai Cloud for Fastly or Vanish, you enable the respective module, and you profit. It can really be as simple as that. We can show why. Because basically, the CDN now does all the checks. Has the pizza expired? Is it still valid? Like pizza supermarkets, they check expiration dates all the time. They know. Is the DAF version still matching? Basically, hey, you've created a new pizza and it looks completely different. They check, hey, we should get the old pizza out of the shelves and put the new pizza in. But we need to give the CDN obviously a heads up whenever a DAF version changes. And you can see those headers for yourself. Xdrupal cache tags, it's a debug option. It's in services default. You just put this to true, the debug cacheabilities headers, and then you'll get this nice results of the cache tags, the contacts, and whenever it expires. So this gives you lots of possibilities in debugging that. Great, but what about the DAF itself? As said before, we don't want to get it from warehouse before. Let's put it in a fridge on the counter. And Drupal has chain fast. It's really great. It's APCU. It's shared memory within a P2P process. It's a key value store available. I've made it even more slicker. Well, we haven't implemented yet. But there is an upstream pitch for APCU, which could make chain fast even 1,000% more effective. If anyone's interested, ping me to implement it. So if you have things that are seldom changing, put it into a special bin, and that's the reason why we need special cache bins, and connect that bin to chain fast. It's important that this is mostly read-only cache traffic. And as simple as that. So we put our pizza DAF, once gluten-free, once gluten, in this bin, pizza DAF bin, and we put this in our settings to the chain fast. And that's it. And now, whenever I want the pizza DAF, it's near the counter. But custom-made pizzas, don't store them near the counter. We don't have the space. Don't put something in that has lots of variations. You can serious write log problems. If your cache gets full, can completely log up. Be very, very careful with what you put into chain fast. Can bring e-commerce shops down. Have seen that. It brought it down during the load test, obviously, fortunately. But yeah, need to take care of that. APCU is really cool. It's used for file cache, class cache, config cache. But those are all things that are seldomly changing only on a deployment. Don't forget Redis Memcached. MySQL is basically the warehouse that's across the street, but Memcached is the fridge that's in the room next door, and APCU is the fridge below the counter. That's how you can think about it. So 2 to 5 milliseconds, 0.5 and 0.05 milliseconds, usually like the times. 2 cases to distinguish. We have caches used for actually creating the pizza from the parts, and then we have caches used for delivering the pizza with basically page cache, dynamic page cache, CDN cache, and even browser cache. So always important to distinguish those two. That's important. If we get lots of customers at once for pizza with spring onions, we can cache it only for a very short while, micro-caching, potential bottleneck, stampede protection, built into most CDNs. You have a shield. 1,000 people want the same page. It's only generated once. Because we don't want to prepare lots of pizza in parallel. We just prepare one spring onion pizza, just replicate it. This is how stampede protection looks. Look it up in the slides later. Common caching pitfalls are basically the most common are missing dependencies, variations, or that you put max H0 everywhere because this freaking thing does not work, so I'm just disabling the cache. Please don't do it. I hope this session will help that you understand caching better, that you don't have to litter your code with max H0 everywhere, and that at least when it comes to launching, you can remove those. If you need to use max H0, please use a lazy builder. If you need something dynamic, use a lazy builder, use a placeholder. It can help Drupal make so much better decisions in optimizing things. Just remember, Margarita and added mushrooms is so much faster than making it from scratch. Know what depends on what, know when something needs to be invalidated, and use RenderWiz. It can be a really nice help here in showing that visually to you. Have fun, and I'll make pizza now. I'm really, really hungry. So yummy. It's, yeah. So more questions. I think we have like 2 minutes for we are over, but I'm still answering the question. Cache tags was a use case. I've done that before. It's really, you need to expire something, a block on the front page, you added cache tag, and whenever you want to expire that, you invalidate that tag. How dynamic caching works for authenticate users is your scanned user role stored in the HTTP request header. It can be, but if you do it on CDN, basically, you need to do it there. Oh yeah, maybe I can real quick share the slides. Maybe I can't. Okay. Let's see this. Here we go. There's a slide live. For me. Okay. Back to questions. Caching optimized for OS users. Yes, we can cache optimized on the CDN, but it needs development effort. You need someone like a performance shop, unfortunately, for that, that can do that for you. Post render executing as part of a laser builder. You basically you can just render it. We collect it out of band, and then we have a render context where we can take it. APCU versus dedicated caching service like Redis on Memcache. You use both. You don't decide on Redis or Memcache. You use APCU plus Redis or Memcache. Again, APCU is a fridge below the counter. For Memcache, you need to go into the next room. That's not very efficient. If you wanna do something, first of all, Fastly can also do authenticate user caching. We do that for some of our clients. But if you just want one dynamic block, the easiest is to make a placeholder, and you just render your own code in the placeholder, and then you just put an AJAX request that replaces the placeholder. RenderWiz was the module for the last slide. Lazy loading module, you can basically use whatever, BigPipe probably. Okay, yeah. We are way out of time. Thank you very much. That was all the questions. And yeah, thanks a lot. Slides should work now. Sorry, had to actually share them. Yeah, people are coming. Oh yeah, I should share the link maybe again for those that haven't gotten it yet. Copy link and put it in the chat again. yeah, I mean, I don't know. I keep that room open for a while to chat with whoever wants. Not sure if that's allowed, but we do it. You can drop whenever you want. But Steve Bing, do you have the feeling that Drupal isn't snappy whenever it comes to websites where OST users are required? Yeah, in general, they can be snappy. They just need to be programmed that way, and we can do so much more even there. Okay, Johnny Herino, not sure if you're still there, but basically how post-run execute part of lazy builder can then do render, get the attached public correctly. We do magic. Basically, we create a render context, and whenever we render something and you have something attached, then we push it into this render context. And when your render call is finished, then we push it back. Basically, once we come back from the post render callback, and that's how we can do that. Memcache versus Redis, it depends on preference, basically. We use mostly Memcache as we also maintain those modules, but they are very similar overall. Memcache does some things in a certain way, Redis is in other ways more powerful. So it really depends on your side, on your use case, on what to change or what to use. Yeah, agree. They're functionally equivalent. The Drupal modules, yeah, Drupal modules function essentially the same way. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna try to get the chat. I want to save my chat. Let's see how that works. So now it's not stored automatically. Until then, I need to keep the room open.